Hey, welcome back, subscribers, to my world of stocks. So, there's actually one Magnificent 7 stock that is still negative over the past year, only one of them. And yet, I think it's a great pickup right now for the long term, and that is the mighty Apple, ticker symbol AAPL, for which in today's video, I'm going to give you 5 bullish reasons why I think it's worth considering for the long term. Plus, I'll even give you one bearish reason to consider staying away, because I do actually think that there is some cause for concern, even though I do really like Apple stock right here. So let's go ahead and jump into it, guys. 5 bullish reasons, one bearish. Let's do it. Okay, so starting first with the bullish reason number one, probably the most obvious is that the stock price is currently going through a fairly large and, in my opinion, attractive dip. In fact, when looking at each of the Magnificent 7 stocks, Microsoft is up over 15% in the past year, Amazon is up over 25%, Nvidia is up 39%, Meta is up 46%, Tesla is up 31%, and even if you include Broadcom, like in some of the new definitions of the Magnificent 7, they're also up 79% too. And yet, not only is Apple actually negative, again, the only one of them, but they're also down close to a fifth of their value from the top. And look, for what is typically a very strong and stable performing stock, a big dip like this should probably be looked at as a buying opportunity, just like all the other little dips were in the past too. Now, the obvious question is, why is Apple stock falling right now, especially at a time when practically, all their peers, including all the other big tech stocks, especially any tech stocks really with like AI exposure, heavy AI exposure, they've been absolutely skyrocketing this whole year. Well, that mostly has to do Apple's fallen stock price with concerns over slowing iPhone sales, which actually declined in 2023 and were almost flat last year, as well as the potential impact from tariffs. But here's why I think that it's an overreaction long term. Bullish reason number two is that Apple actually has some pretty exciting catalysts on the horizon that could help demand pick up and the stock rebound. First of all, let's just get tariffs out of the way right now, because I feel like that is much more of a temporary issue that will eventually pass as new trade deals get signed, which may actually turn into tailwinds in the future if they give Apple even more favorable access, to foreign markets and stuff like that. But even for the time being, Apple has already been adjusting their supply chain for years to really help mitigate the shorter term impacts as much as possible. They've been making a lot of progress on that. But second, though, new iPhone lineups are coming out that often, whenever they do, they often lead to a pickup in sales and also a pickup in the stock price right along with it. And I actually think that this year's lineup in particular could sell pretty well for them given their new designs. For example, their upcoming iPhone 17 line is expected to feature the biggest batteries in iPhone history, while also featuring a new model dubbed iPhone 17 Air. So think of like, MacBook Air, the iPad Air. This is going to be the iPhone Air. I believe this is the first time they're ever doing that, and it's set to be much thinner and lighter with an overall design refresh too. And of course, they're going to have, I think there's like 4 different iPhones that they're going to have for that lineup. So they'll have kind of, a little bit of everything for anyone, whatever it is that you're looking for in an iPhone, which part of that is the reason why analysts are now projecting a return to around mid-single digit top line and close to double-digit bottom line growth in the coming years. But personally, I think the bigger product launch will actually be coming next year, where analysts are also expecting a new folding phone to finally make its debut in 2026. And look, I get that folding phones are not super popular at the moment because of really their high price tags and more fragile designs, with most consumers, still kind of sticking with traditional candy bar phones. But you have to remember that Apple is well known for waiting out the market, basically letting Android companies innovate with new designs and features, while Apple just kind of sits back and lets them deal with, all the bugs and all the issues that come with all of that new innovation, only to later copy these new features later on once all the bugs have really been ironed out, to where they then launch their own versions, typically without most of those issues. And many times they even improve on those new features too, do it better than the others, because they were able to sit back and see how they did it, and then all the meanwhile they've been working on improving it too. So they a lot of times they actually do it even better, which ultimately gets the whole kind of Apple fan base really excited and gets them out the door and, in line for purchasing a new iPhone, or I guess these days usually just order it online. But yeah, it gets them excited enough to buy the new iPhones. And look, when it comes to folding phones in particular, we're pretty much at that point now where the designs have improved greatly. I mean, my OnePlus Open, for example, this is a folding phone right here. It's already like a couple years old of a phone, but it's been holding up fantastically well for me. I have no scratches on the inner screen. The camera is also one of the best in the world. So they're actually putting really good cameras on folding phones too now. And the whole thing is actually, relatively thin still, despite this being a folding phone. So I actually really like this phone, and I could see how, if Apple was to come out and do this even better, which they probably will, then I do think a lot of iPhone users would be willing to upgrade at that point, especially when they've been stuck with, the same old kind of boring designs for years from Apple, which has always been my biggest critique of that company too, and why I've never used really any of their products myself, is because I just felt like it was always kind of the same thing year after year. Everybody owns the same phone. It was kind of boring to me, so I always stuck with Android. And now I even use a folding phone, so that's how much I'm into that technology. But hey, you couple, a folding slash flipping phone in a future lineup for them next year, I think that could really shake things up for them and be a catalyst for growth and be an upgrade cycle for their iPhones. And to quote a Bloomberg article, one analyst insisted that the iPhone Fold will debut next year, noting that Samsung has already done much of the heavy lifting for them in the category over the past 7 years and has now set up Apple for success. And that's, again, another thing you have to consider. I know time flies, but Samsung has actually been doing this, working on folding phones for like the past 7 years, while Apple has just kind of sat back and learned from that. And now a lot of the hard work has already been done for them. It's going to be easier for Apple to release a folding phone themselves. By the way, Apple's upcoming iOS 27, the operating system, it's already being built with the iPhone Fold in mind. It's going to have all kinds of new software features to make the phone more productive and attractive to users. So you can really get the most out of that phone, make it a productivity device too, kind of like a hybrid between a phone and also an iPad. And I just think once they present that, I think a lot of people are going to get excited for it. However, this does bring me to reason number 3 now, bullish reason number 3, which is that even though we do need hardware sales to pick up for Apple, for them to have success, long term, you shouldn't forget that services has actually helped offset much of that already, being a major growth driver for them at much higher margins. Last quarter, for example, services revenue, this includes, App Store sales, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, fitness, iCloud, and more, it was up 12% year over year, and it reached a record high of close to $27 billion. That's just for one quarter alone. So they're doing well over 100 billion run rate per year easily. And again, what's really attractive about that is their margins, because while hardware sales did around 35% margins, services was more than 75%. I mean, those are huge margins, guys. And that's why, anytime you invest in a stock, whenever it's like a software type of stock, they usually have premium valuations because investors love those software-like margins. Well, Apple is becoming more and more of a services type of company. So in other words, while their services revenue continues to grow, which it absolutely is, it's their biggest growth driver right now, then so too will it significantly boost Apple's profitability, as Apple won't have to rely so heavily on just iPhone sales alone. In fact, since 2015, the percentage of iPhone revenue has dropped from 65% to just about half of all their sales last year. And with over 2.3 billion devices already active worldwide, Apple has that massive user base that you really need to continue marketing these services to and keep that high margin growth coming. So again, that's reason number 3, that Apple is becoming a bit more of a software company as opposed to just a hardware one. Now, this is going to bring us to reason number 4, and that's that while Apple continues to work on these new products, new services, and all that type of stuff, they're still sitting on a gigantic mountain of cash, and that ensures that they can invest in new opportunities for further growth too whenever the opportunities present themselves. In fact, last quarter the company held close to $120 billion of highly liquid current assets. Guys, that's more than most companies' entire market cap. That's more than most countries' entire GDP, and close to half of that, by the way, is also sitting in just pure cash alone. So with such a massive hoard of cash like that, Apple is able to do pretty much anything it wants. It can pour billions into R&D to cook up, another popular product or service to add to its already giant ecosystem, like they did with their Apple Vision Pro AR glasses, for example. It can develop new custom chips like it's done with their M4 line of silicon that features next-gen machine learning accelerators to power AI. And it features 10-core CPU with what they claim is the fastest CPU core in the world, or they can even venture completely out into a brand new category altogether, like they did in the past with the Apple Car, which did eventually, of course, get canceled. But the fact that a smartphone maker could even attempt to enter such an incredibly difficult and capital-intensive market like the automotive industry just shows what so many billions of dollars can really do for you at practically a moment's notice. Not to mention the massive safety net that it provides if you happen to run into any unexpected crisis. Say the market flips into a recession and all of a sudden people aren't willing to buy your expensive phones for a few months or even years. You'll be happy to be sitting on so much cash to where the company can easily stay afloat and wait out any struggles at a time when many other companies are instead going under left and right. In fact, Apple might even be in a situation to acquire a smaller company that is struggling, which is something that they can even do right now at this very moment. Like, how about they acquired Discord at around a $10 to $15 billion valuation? It could really strengthen Apple's social communication and gaming ecosystems, especially among younger demographics. Or what about Sonos for audio products, or Peloton for fitness hardware and subscriptions? I mean, you could probably get both of those for like $5 billion around there. Or maybe spend a little more than that. You could even get Duolingo and get huge exposure into online education, and really bolster up your services even more that way too. So, I mean, there's just so many options when you've got that much money. And I think like I said, there's just a lot of options out there for them. And yet, there's still another fantastic use for all of that cash that Apple has already been implementing. It's bullish reason number 5 that quietly makes the stock more valuable every single year, and that's their monumental stock buyback program, where Apple has been consistently buying back more of their own stock than almost any other company on earth. In fact, just in recent quarters, Apple has spent over $25 billion on stock buybacks. Again, that's not per year, that's per quarter. So it's absolutely mind-blowing how much they spend on that. And the only reason they can even afford it is because of the insane amounts of cash that they generate. Last year, for example, they did close to $400 billion in sales, of which 118 went to operating cash flow, and still over 110 of that went to pure free cash flow alone. And so with those massive profits and the tens of billions that they buy back in stock every quarter, it in turn directly lowers the share count and thus raises their earnings per share while also lowering that PE ratio valuation. In other words, just for holding onto your stock, your shares are becoming more valuable over time simply thanks to how Apple is spending their profits. Not to mention that they even pay a small but growing dividend too. Anyway, all of this is why I think this stock is actually a buy right now. But speaking of that PE ratio, there is one reason why I could understand a more kind of bearish take on the stock right now, and that is simply due to the rich valuation, where their adjusted forward PE ratio sits at about 20% more expensive than the sector median. But I would argue, or note, I guess, that their gap PE is actually cheaper, and it gets even better over time thanks to those buybacks and thanks to the expected growth and rebound that they're expected to have. So in all, even with the relatively low growth and the premium valuation, I still think Apple is just looking like a pretty good stock to own right now when you consider all the factors involved and at its current stock price. But hey, that's just my opinion, guys. I would love to hear from you down below. What do you guys think about this? Let me know if you own Apple stock. Are you considering picking any up, or are you waiting for it to get dragged down even lower? Do you think that'll happen? Let me know down in the comments. But hey, thanks again for stopping by, my friends. I hope you're all having a great week out there, and I will catch you in the next one. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.